Hey, first grade. Today we are going to read the story of Tom Thumb. Our learning objectives are to review similarities and differences in 3 fairy tales, retell the main events of a folktale, demonstrate an understanding of the word commotion, and describe the unique experiences of the main character in a folktale. Our key vocabulary today are avoid, clever, commotion, and scampered. Avoid is a verb. Verbs are our action words. And avoid means to prevent something from happening. I always try to avoid missing the bus by waking up a half hour earlier than I need to. Clever. Clever is an adjective. Adjectives are our descriptive words, meaning they describe someone or something. Clever means smart, able to think and figure things out quickly. Kim was a very clever student who could easily solve any math problem. Commotion. Commotion is a noun, and commotion is noisy confusion and excitement. The fire drill caused quite a commotion. Scampered. Scampered is a verb. Another action word, right? Scampered means ran quickly. The raccoon scampered away from the trash can where we noisily turned the corner. Let's do a little bit of review. So what were the 3 stories that you heard recently? Cinderella, The Girl with the Red Slippers, and Billy Beg. Do you remember which countries these stories originated in? Cinderella originated in France. The Girl with the Red Slippers originated in Egypt. And Billy Beg originated in Ireland. Okay, let's review some of the similarities and differences between Cinderella, The Girl with the Red Slippers, and Billy Beg. Remember that each circle represents one thing. In this case, each circle represents a read aloud. The center, or places that overlap, show similarities between the circles that are overlapping. So here in the very center, that shows the similarities between all 3 stories because all 3 circles are overlapping here. This section shows similarities between Billy Beg and Cinderella because those are the 2 circles or stories that are overlapping. This shows the similarities between Billy Beg and the Girl with the Red Slippers because those are the 2 circles that are overlapping there. And this one shows the similarities between Cinderella and the Girl with the Red Slippers because that's what the 2 circles that are overlapping here. Then this part is for Cinderella only, this part is for the Girl with the Red Slippers only, and this part is for Billy Beg only because it's not overlapping with any other circles. So in the middle, they all 3 had the main characters whose parents were not in the story, right? They all become royalty at the end. And the main characters are all identified by their feet fitting in a particular shoe. Some differences were that Cinderella was treated poorly by her stepmother and stepsisters, while Rhodopis was treated unfairly by other servants. And then Billy Beg, he wasn't really treated unfairly by anybody. Cinderella marries a prince, while Rhodopis marries a pharaoh, and Billy marries a princess. Cinderella has glass slippers, while Rhodopis has red silk slippers with leather soles, and Billy Beg has boots. Also, Cinderella lives with her stepmother and stepsisters, while Rhodopis lives in the master's house, and Billy Beg lives by himself. So, folktales and fairy tales sometimes teach lessons through the events in a plot. A lesson is something valuable learned through a character's experiences in a story. We can learn from the experiences characters have in stories. The next set of stories you will hear are all folktales with main characters no bigger than the size of a thumb. Remember, a folktale is a story that has been told over and over again. Today's read aloud originated in a country called England many, many years ago. This is the continent of Europe. We've talked about the continent of Europe before. And this red spot, that is the country of England. Remember, our vocabulary are avoid, clever, commotion, and scampered. How do you think being as small as a thumb could be useful or helpful? Do you think it could cause problems? Listen carefully to learn about the kinds of adventures Tom Thumb has. Once there was a farmer who used to sit and poke at the fire in the evening while his wife sat at her spinning wheel. The farmer would sigh and say, "How sad it is that we have no children. Our house is so quiet, while other people's houses are so noisy and cheerful." "Yes," said the wife, "if only we had a child." A year later, the woman gave birth to a little boy. He was strong and healthy, but he was no bigger than a thumb. He wasn't taller than your thumb. His parents named him Tom Thumb. As Tom grew up, he proved to be a very clever and intelligent lad. One day, when his father was going out to cut wood, he said, "I wish there was someone who could bring me the cart out later." "I'll do it," said Tom. "But, Tom," said his father, "how can you? You are too small to hold the reins." "Never mind," said Tom. "Have Mother harness the horse. Then I'll sit in the horse's ear and tell him which way to go." And so Tom's mother harnessed the horse and put Tom in the horse's ear. Tom called out, "Giddy up," and the horse started walking. Now, it happened that as the horse and cart turned the corner, a strange man was walking by and heard Tom calling out directions to the horse. "Look," he said to himself, "there goes a wagon, and the driver is calling to his horse, but the driver is nowhere to be seen." So what do you think the stranger thinks is going on? He's probably really confused because he can't see Tom Thumb because Tom Thumb's too small. So the man followed the horse, the horse and the wagon to the place where Tom's father was chopping wood. When Tom spotted his father, he cried out, "Whoa, boy!" Then he said, "Look, father, here I am." Oh, sorry, I forgot to flip the page. That was the picture from when Tom was driving the horse. Tom's father lifted his son down from the horse and set him on a stump. When the stranger saw this, he thought, "Look here, that little fellow could be useful. I should take him to town and have him do little jobs for me." He went up to Tom's father and said, "See here, old man, how about letting that little man go to town with me? I'll take good care of him and even give you money for his trouble." "No," said Tom's father. "He is the apple of my eye, and I would be too sad to see him go." The phrase "apple of my eye" means someone that you love and appreciate above all others. Okay. Tom crept up onto his father's shoulder and whispered, "Go ahead, father. Let me go, and I'll be back in no time." "But, Tom," his father began. "Trust me," Tom broke in. "I'll take care of everything." So Tom's father let him go with the man. Off went Tom, riding on the brim of the man's hat. That night, after traveling for several hours, the man came to a barn that was located next to a quiet house. He decided the barn would be a good place to sleep and rest up for travels the next day. When he was all settled in for the night, the man took off his hat. At that moment, Tom scampered away, or quickly ran away, and slipped into a mouse hole, crying out, "So long, my good fellow! Have a good trip without me!" The man got down on his hands and knees and poked sticks into holes, but he couldn't find Tom. Eventually, he gave up. When the man left, Tom came out of his hole. He found an empty snail shell and said, "This looks like a safe place to spend the night." But just as he lay down, he heard voices of two robbers whispering. "Yes," said one of the robbers, "this is the house. The mayor won't be back until tomorrow, so now is the time to rob his house." A mayor is the leader of a town and its surrounding land, okay? "But how can we do it? Although the mayor is away, the cook and maid are still there, so we'll have to be quiet to avoid waking them." or prevent them from waking up, okay? Tom knew that he had to do something to stop the robbers, so he sprang out of the shell and shouted, "I have an idea." "Who is that?" asked one of the frightened robbers. "Take me with you, and I'll help you," said Tom. "Who's talking? Where are you?" asked the robbers. "Down here," cried Tom. The robbers looked down and they saw Tom waving to them. One robber lifted him up and said, "What's this, little one? How are you going to help us rob the mayor?" "It will be easy," said Tom. "The mayor keeps his money behind iron bars, right? I can slip behind the bars and hand you the money." "Hee hee, that's a fine idea, little one," said the robbers, and they snickered or laughed disrespectfully all the way to the mayor's house. Then they fell quiet and whispered to Tom, "Speak softly here. We don't want to get caught." "Of course," said Tom. All right, so what characters have you met so far? Tom Thumb's parents, Tom Thumb, the strange man, and the robbers, right? How would you describe Tom? What are some adjectives you might use to describe Tom? Small. They said he was clever, right? What might Tom do to stop the robbers? What do you think? Let's see if you're right. He sneaked into the mayor's house and slipped between the bars where the money was kept. Then he called out to the robbers in his loudest voice, "How much do you want? Do you want it all?" Okay, stand up if you think that Tom is shouting because he's trying to get the robbers caught. And stay sitting if you think that Tom is shouting because he doesn't think that the robbers can hear him. Let's see if you're right. "Shh!" hissed the robbers. "Be quiet! You'll wake the cook and the maid. We can hear you fine. Just start handing out the money." But Tom pretended not to hear them, and once again he shouted, "What's that you say? You want me to take all the money? I'll give you everything. Just hold out your hands." All of the commotion, which is noisy confusion and excitement, woke the cook and the maid, and they came running to see what all the noise was about. When they burst in, the robbers ran away. Tom slipped away to the barn. All of the excitement had made him sleepy, so he went to sleep on a big pile of hay. The next morning, the maid came to the barn and pitched a large bundle of hay, with Tom still sleeping in it. The cow ate up the hay, and poor Tom slid into the cow's stomach. Remember, the stomach is the part of the body where the food goes to be digested after you swallowed it, right? "Goodness me," Tom said sleepily. "Somebody forgot to put windows in this house." Suddenly, splish, something wet and heavy fell on Tom's head. It was a mouthful of hay. The cow was eating again, and more wet, sticky hay fell on Tom. He called out, "That's enough! No more hay! I'm quite full, thank you." The milkmaid was milking the cow, and when she heard the voice come out of the cow, she fell off her milking stool. When the milkmaid fell off her milking stool, she startled the cow, who then sneezed a big sneeze. Achoo! The sneeze caused Tom to come flying out. Yuck! Tom landed onto a garbage heap where the milkmaid's family had thrown the remains of their dinner. Tom struggled to get up, surrounded by pieces of meat and vegetables. He had just managed to start to stand up when, zing! A hungry wolf snapped up the piece of the meat that Tom was caught on and ran off with it. As the wolf ran, Tom bounced along and thought, "Well, this is an odd place to be." Then he said to the wolf, "Mr. Wolf, wouldn't you rather eat some delicious treats instead of this old piece of meat? I can show you where to find such treats." "And where might that be?" growled the wolf. "In a house I know," said Tom. "It's full of lots of delicious fresh food." Tom led the wolf back to his mother's and father's house, and when they got there, the wolf ate until he was stuffed. Then Tom called out, "Help! Help! There's a wolf in the house!" Tom's father came running with a big stick. He chased the wolf with the stick and sent him howling into the woods. "Good work, Father," said Tom. His father looked down and cried out, "Tom, where have you been? We've been so worried about you." "Well, Father," said Tom, "I've been in too many places to count, and I think that from now on I would rather stay with you." Why do you guys think that Tom would rather stay at home with his father now? Because it was a lot of craziness, right? "Oh, my dear boy," said his father, "I never should have let you go, and I will never let you go again." All right, that's the end of our story. If you need to hop up and get a wiggle break in, maybe get a snack, go ahead and do that, and then come straight back so that we can do our comprehension and word work, okay? Oopsie. All right. Why do the farmer and his wife name their baby boy Tom Thumb? The farmer and his wife name their baby boy Tom Thumb because he is so tiny and only as long as a thumb. How does Tom surprise the milkmaid? Tom surprises the milkmaid by speaking from inside the cow's stomach. How does Tom make it back home? He convinces the wolf that he knows a place with better food than the scraps. Could this story really happen, or is it fiction? This story is fiction because it could not really happen. How do we know it couldn't really happen? Because people can't really be the size of thumbs and animals can't really talk. Folktales sometimes teach lessons just like fables do. Is there a lesson or something we can learn and use in our own lives from this folktale? How about a little person can do great and wonderful things? Okay, time for our word work. In our read aloud, you heard all the commotion woke the cook and maid, and they came running to see what all the noise was about. I want you to say the word commotion with me. Commotion. I want you to say it in a whisper voice. Commotion. Now I want you to say it in a mouse voice. Commotion. And now I want you to say it in a robot voice. Commotion. Commotion means noisy excitement and or confusion. Whenever there was a loud commotion on the playground, it usually meant that the students were excited about something. Have you ever heard or seen a commotion? Let's make one with our voices right now, okay? So if I told you to make a commotion, that means that you got to be kind of crazy and excited and a little bit loud, right? So we might be like, woo, yeah, woo. That would be a commotion, right? Especially if there was a lot of us doing that. All right. I'm going to read several sentences. If the sentence I read describes a commotion, I want you to say, "What a commotion." If the sentence I read does not describe a commotion, say, "That's not a commotion." And I want you to make sure that you are using complete sentences. A big and noisy school assembly. What a commotion. How about a quiet dinner? That's not a commotion. What about students excitedly playing at recess? What a commotion, right? It said excitedly. A busy cafeteria where students are having food fights. What a commotion. How about an empty, peaceful beach? That's not a commotion. What about a classroom with students running around everywhere and shouting? What a commotion. And last, what about a crowded supermarket with too many people hurrying up and down the aisles? What a commotion. All right. So proverbs are short traditional sayings that have been passed along orally from generation to generation. These sayings usually express general truths based on experiences and observations of everyday life. Okay, let's look at this picture. So at the end of today's folktale, Tom's father asks about his adventures, and Tom replies that they were exciting, but that he would rather stay at home. So Tom could have said, it was exciting, but there was no place like home. Have you ever heard anybody say that? There's no place like home? This proverb is another way of saying that traveling to other places and having other adventures might be fun and exciting, but home is the best place of all. So when you are excited to return home after a trip or after you've had a long day, you could say, there's no place like home. I want you to see if you can think of any examples of when you were happy to return home. Okay? And I want you to tell somebody about that. All right, friends, let's make sure that we have completed all of our learning objectives, and then I will let you go to complete your Nearpod. All right, we reviewed the similarities and differences in 3 fairy tales, right, with our Venn diagram. We were able to retell the main events of Tom Thumb using questions and talking about the story elements. We were able to define and understand the word commotion. And in just a moment, you're going to describe the unique experiences of a main character, Tom Thumb, in a folktale. All right? I will see you next time.